I want to speak a little bit about credit because we know that in South Africa, technically and legally, credit is really very highly regulated. There is legislation in place to try and protect South Africans from credit suppliers who are unscrupulous, but we know it happens all the time. But talk to us about credit in South Africa.
So, I mean, the regulation in South Africa is very advanced, it's very specific, and I think the National Credit Regulator has done a good job in creating very strict guidelines to manage credit in this country, and so the customers are better off ultimately, and they're working very hard at that. Everything is regulated, so the pricing, the initiation fees, the monthly service fees are very well defined, and ultimately that leaves the customer in a good position to evaluate what type of product they're getting, what's good for them, and what the total cost of credit is going to be for them should they need to take a loan.
But we know that not all credit is good. In fact, there are very few types of credit that are good. Would you talk to us about that difference?
So I think the first thing is to always take credit from a reputable organization, someone who's registered with the National Credit Regulator. You can rely on that, and from formal businesses. It's not wise to go and borrow from people who aren't regulated by the regulator or registered with him, and you need to understand what interest is being applied to that loan or credit facility, and how long you're going to need it for. It doesn't make sense to take a 24-month loan if you need the money for 6 months, and that has a bearing on the total cost of credit.
Talk to us a little bit about a credit record. Where can a customer get that?
You're entitled to one free credit record a year, and you can get that from any of the credit bureau's websites. We use TransUnion, and if you visit transunion.co.za, you can retrieve your free credit report. And what a credit report basically shows is your credit history and your payment behavior. So when you pay back late or on time, that gets recorded, and that builds up a history of your behavior with credit and allows organizations who offer credit to evaluate your credit risk.
So let's just take it down to the person on the street. Yes. If I've got my credit record in my hand, what would it allow me to do, or what would it potentially hamper me from doing?
It wouldn't necessarily, it would allow you to see what credit you have on your record, which accounts you have, what is the outstanding balances, what your payment behavior has been like. So for example, if you have a bond, you will be able to see that bond, the outstanding balance, and whether you've paid on the expected date each month. And if you haven't, then it tells you how far, sorry.
No, that's okay.
Okay.
You can go from if it hasn't.
If
Al? Can we take it from there? Okay.
If it hasn't, where was I going with that? If you haven't paid on time, for example, maybe it was a tough month, then it breaks it down into bands of 30 days in terms of how delayed your payments are. So it's not a train smash if you haven't paid, if you've paid late, but it's not desirable because it reflects on your credit report.
And of course that credit report will then determine whether I'm able to purchase a house.
Absolutely.
Or the type of lending rates that my bank would give me.
So if a credit provider was looking at that particular scenario, they would take note that you haven't necessarily been able to fulfill your obligations on the date that you said you would every single month, and that may impact their decision or the interest rate at which they offer you any credit should they extend it to you.
Now, after reading the results of your survey and seeing how the lives of your customers are affected by their money,
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit about financial literacy in South Africa, because unfortunately many South Africans aren't financially literate.
Absolutely, and this is why the financial literacy was the focus of this survey this year. We've run it for the past 3 years, but we decided to place a great emphasis on financial literacy this time around. And I think that the old saying, knowledge is power, is absolutely correct in this situation. You need to understand the difference between simple interest and compound interest. You need to understand what the total cost of the credit's going to be, so that you can make informed decisions. And I think that, you know, credit's complicated, money's complicated, but the more effort you put into understanding money and credit and how it all works, the better off you're going to be in managing that.
What do you say to the viewer who's watching this who says, actually, I'm not as financially literate as I could be, and I want to upskill myself? Where would you direct them? How do you begin this process?
It's a very good question. I would recommend that you read as much as possible on credit, and just to take a bit of time looking at interest rates and the service fees, and jot them down on a piece of paper when you are going through that process. Unfortunately, there isn't a definitive source of financial education. That's something that we're actually looking at Wonga to help our customers and others to understand credit in particular more thoroughly.